Shrumbalatamena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitanscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyev cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Namo Namo Aniruddhaya Hishikeshendriyatmane Namaha Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nipatatmane Swarga Pavarga Dwaraya Nityam Suchisade Namaha Nama Hiranya Viryaya Chaturhutraya Tantave. So, we are going to continue our discussion on Dharma. I would just like to use the word Dharma because there are many extensions of the word Dharma that we are going to learn about. Our own understanding of Dharma, at best, is very limited because it's almost like a cliche. It's almost a word it's like a buzzword. Everybody says Dharma and everybody talks about Dharma, but in reality, what is Dharma? So, this whole topic of Jaiva Dharma, Jaiva is the Jiva. Dharma of the Jiva is Jaiva Dharma. Dharma is duty that is done and that is performed with an objective of attaining our eternal relationship, or that which is performed with complete knowledge of the eternal relationship. That is Jaiva Dharma. Also called Nitya Dharma. And what is Nitya? Nitya essentially means that which is eternal. Anitya is that which is temporary. So when we start talking about Dharma, there might be many aspects of it which would come for us to think about. Because then there is this definition in the 3rd chapter of Karma Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna talks about performing duty without attachment. So what is it which Krishna is talking about when he says perform duty without attachment? Even there is this concept of dharma. There is this concept of performance of duty. So what is Krishna talking about when he talks about duty without attachment? He is talking about the performance of swadharma. What is swadharma? Swa is that which comes forth because of a conditioning. Our conditioning builds a certain propensity, and that propensity brings and builds forth activities. It builds activities, isn't it? Our propensity can bring activities, that is swadharma. So that which conditioning which brings forth activities, it has to be dealt with in a certain way. Krishna is talking about it in the 3rd chapter. Now let's talk a little bit about conditioning. I spoke about it when I first started the sessions. This is very important for us to understand the topic of conditioning. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 17th chapter, verse 15 through 21. 11, 17, 15 through 21. Yeah, 11th canto, 17th chapter, 15 through 21. So this is a very interesting description as to what is it which is to be defined as different types of dharma. The universal form of the Lord has been used as a map. In that particular universal form of the Lord, the feet are being allocated the Shudra Varna. The feet are also being allocated Grahastha Ashrama. So the Grahastha Ashrama, amongst the 4 ashramas of Brahmacharya, Vanaprastha sannyas is the lowest category. That is being allocated to the feet of the Lord in the universal form. It is the lowest. What is the Varna which is being allocated the lowest? The Shudra Varna. The Brahmana Varna is associated with the mouth and the face of the Lord. Essentially, the function which is at the highest level. Sannyas ashram is also in the same category, which is mapping to the face of the Lord. So sannyas ashram and Brahman Varna are at the highest level. Because why sannyas ashram has been allocated the highest level? Why? What else? I want in this class, initial stages, I want you to think more in terms of duty, more in terms of material nature. Okay? So just to give you a framework of thought process, you want to think in terms of duty, more in terms of material nature. So think about why the sannyas ashram amongst the 4 ashrams is considered to be the superior and the most prominent and is considered equivalent to the face of the Lord. Why is it considered so?
Because you're free from the worldly things.
Good. Very simple, because they are not on the material platform. Their aspirations and their goals are beyond the material platform. At the very least, a sannyasi is aspiring for liberation, which is beyond the material platform. They do not have fruitive desires. They do not have desires of wanting to accomplish something in this world or to yield some fruit because of their activity. They have no interest. Their desires have more to do with outside and beyond this world. Their aspirations have to do with it. They are not connected in the way we would want them to be, we want to think of them as being connected. So the sannyas ashram is the most superior because the aspirations of those in the sannyas ashram is beyond the material sky. Is this clear? So this sannyas ashram is considered to be equal to the Lord's face in the universal form. And why am I saying universal form? Why am I not saying Krishna's original form?
Then the feet would be the most. It would be the most precious than the.
The universal form is a material manifestation. It is a material manifestation. It has the time factor associated with it. The universal form, this Jagat Roop that we see sometimes picturized with Krishna, showing that he is completely the manifestation of time in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that is a material manifestation. He is practically showing that he is everything. It is a material manifestation. So we're using the universal form. Krishna's original Rupa is above Varna Ashram. It is above the material sky. So there really can't be an equitable mapping of the Ashram and Varna onto Krishna's original form. Does it make sense? It has to be the universal form because universal form is of this particular world, this creation. Now, we spoke of the fact that the Shudras and the Grahasthas are at the lowest level in the universal form, at the feet. Doesn't it make you feel quite humble? Yeah, it's a fact. Why? Because the Grahastha ashram, there really isn't any distinction in terms of a Grahastha Vaishnava being inferior. It is not true because many of our acharyas were Grahastha Vaishnavas. So it is not so much that it affects the Vaishnava Dharma. We are not talking about Vaishnava Dharma here. We are talking about Swadharma. Please make a distinction. I am talking about the material designation of activity that is produced due to consciousness and conditioning. That is Swadharma. This is addressed in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. People are basically motivated by their consciousness to act in certain ways. And this produces Dharma. This is Dharma. This Dharma has to do with their conditioning. And it has to do with material nature. The 3 modes of nature, I first spoke about it a few weeks back. I'm touching upon it again, but in a more defined manner, because today we are going to talk about Swadharma. We're going to see how Swadharma is performed. That is, literally, we're going to see what is the 3rd chapter, what is the message in the 3rd chapter. Then we're going to look at, basically, the activities performed in Swadharma. So, the performance, for example, of the Sandhya Vandanam. The 3 different prayers, the 3 different junctions of time during the day, the Brahmanas and even other Varnas, they perform the Gayatri Japa, they do certain Vandanams. So what is that particular activity? Is it Nitya Karma or is it Anitya? Is it Nitya Dharma or is it Naimitika Dharma? You see, this is so critical because there are many activities even in Vaishnava life which we can take up, which may not be Nitya Karma. We might assume it is. Be very careful. Vaishnava Dharma and activity which we think are Nitya Karma could be very different. So we need to understand this intricately so that we can protect ourselves and be satisfied with what is being given by the acharyas rather than speculating that something else is required. So we're going to look at Nitya Karma and Anitya Karma. We want to look to see what is this activity which is being performed, which is called eternal activity or activity that is to be performed constantly, daily. We can't stop it. Nitya is also a word which is used where you can't stop it. You have to continue it. So we want to examine that activity. We want to see if it is going to contribute to Krishna consciousness. Is it equal to Vaishnava Dharma? You see? And then we want to examine Vaishnava Dharma itself. And there are two parts to it. There is Shuddha Vaishnava Dharma, and then there is Viddha Vaishnava Dharma. So we're going to look at the categorization of Vaishnava Dharma into these two parts, and to look at what is pure Vaishnava Dharma and what is called Viddha Vaishnava Dharma, which is a difference, because there are so many assumptions made by people who call themselves Vaishnavas because of their association with Krishna, with Vishnu. But is their Dharma Nitya Dharma? Are they really performing Vaishnava Dharma? We want to examine that. Okay, there are dangers in this material world. Please understand that the path to the spiritual sky has been defined by our acharyas. When we start walking on this path, there might be distractions which might be so close to the original path that you could just veer away and then get distracted and get lost completely, and an entire lifetime's work can get lost because of it. Does it make sense? Because if you have a road to the spiritual sky which has been defined by the acharyas, let us assume that there's a parallel road, there's something close to it which resembles the road that you are on. There are chances that you could get distracted in between and veer away, thinking that that makes sense as well. So one has to understand what is Vaishnava Dharma, what is Viddha, and what is Shuddha Vaishnava Dharma, what is the distinction, what is the Acharya's ideas of these. How was this? So in Viddha Vaishnava Dharma, today we'll be studying what is Jnana. Jnana, I would say Jnana Viddha Vaishnava Dharma. Then there is Karma Viddha Vaishnava Dharma, which is Dharma, Vaishnava Dharma, contaminated by desires of Jnana, contaminated by desires of karma. We're going to see how the contaminations occur. Because generally, what we understand as Hinduism is quite complex. And then when you come into the area of Srimad Bhagavatam defines Vaishnava Dharma. That is the reason why it is the scripture which is to be followed by Vaishnavas in terms of definitions, because it really defines and makes it very clear that this is what it is. There really isn't anything else. It's Srimad Bhagavatam basically gives us everything. So let's talk a little bit about Swadharma. We spoke that the feet of the Lord has been given the category of the Shudras and the Grahastha Ashram. The face of the Lord has been given the category of the Brahmana Varna, and then also the Sannyas Ashram. Okay? And then higher and higher, you have the renounced ashrams closer to the face of the Lord rather than to the feet. Okay? Dependent on the amount of activity which people perform within that ashram, which is closely related to material nature. Because in the Grahastha ashram, it's very difficult to distinguish what our desires are. Are we really desiring something for the purpose of pleasing Krishna, or are we desiring something for the purpose of feeling our own desires in certain ways? It's difficult to distinguish because sometimes justifications happen. You see? Justifications can happen. So that's the reason why there's a lot of contamination in this ashram, because we're trying to exist in this world and we do some planning and we do some desiring, but then it may not be Nitya Dharma. We have to understand it. That's why it has been classified in the lower strata. Where in the Grahastha ashram, like a Shudra has no peace if he cannot eat, sleep, mate, and defend. If a Shudra is basically subjected to uncertainty in eating, sleeping, mating, defending, he will have problems. He will have severe mental agitation. If you study revolutions that have occurred in history, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, if you study revolution in general, where communism has come or when the monarchy was completely removed, It was because of the instability of the Shudra population, where the Shudra population did not have enough to eat. They were unstable. When they become unstable, they start suspecting the intentions of the higher classes. When they start suspecting the intentions of the higher classes, they take over political power. That is the reason why you have political uprisings occur, and they come from the Shudra class, the laborer class. Do you understand? Because they can't really be without steadiness in eating, mating, sleeping, defending. They get very agitated if that is disturbed. So is the case with the Grahasthashram. In the Grahasthashram, if this eating, mating, sleeping, defending is not steady and it is not situated smoothly or stable, there's mental agitation. So it is not a suitable ashram in that sense, because there's mental agitation on things which are natural to occur in the material world. The material world, there will be natural disturbances to the eating, mating, sleeping, defending. It's 100% guaranteed. It's a matter of fact, because there will be economic disturbances, there will be relationship disturbances, health disturbances, so it becomes unstable. So stability is required. So it doesn't mean that we can change the ashram based on our propensities, in the sense our philosophical definitions. The ashrams themselves happen because we are motivated to be in such ashrams. There are proper vehicles depending on who it is, and then the vehicles themselves have certain defects. You see, one could be riding a Mercedes, and a Mercedes could have problems. Someone else could be using a Toyota, they could have their own problems. The point is, it really doesn't matter. A vehicle is what the ashram is all about. And the vehicle can present difficulties. This is the substance of Shastra. Choice of a vehicle, if it is not proper, can present difficulties. A vehicle in general can present difficulties. Have that understanding. Don't go without that understanding that the vehicle is free without problems. Every vehicle can have challenges. Some vehicles give more challenges than others, which is the purport of Shastra. Okay? This is a complicated topic, but it is a fact. It has to be approached factually. Okay? Now, so let us look at a few qualities which are given in Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 17th chapter, 15 to 21. Let's see how the Swadharma gets defined in Srimad Bhagavatam. So here they're talking about Brahmanical qualities: peacefulness, self-control, austerity, cleanliness, satisfaction, tolerance, simple straightforwardness, devotion to me, Krishna, which is Krishna is talking about it, mercy and truthfulness are the natural qualities of the Brahmanas. So here we are looking at basically peacefulness and self-control and austerity. All of this is not available in the lower modes. You cannot be peaceful in passion. You cannot be peaceful in mixed passion and ignorance. You can never be peaceful in ignorance, pure ignorance. You can be, ignorance is bliss, as the word goes. Sometimes we watch these pigs in Vrindavan. They lie in the gutter with the gutter water right here to the nostrils. They're submerged, and they look so blissful. See, sometimes you can say ignorance is bliss. Okay, people use the word, but in reality, it's not a peaceful condition because there's always fear. Ignorance produces fear. An animal is always under fear. You see, they're always afraid that something is going to happen. That fear is a part of who they are, even though there is this whole statement of seemingly peaceful, attributes. So a Brahmana essentially has to be in the mode of goodness, because peacefulness and truthfulness and all of this is not available in the other consciousness, other aspects of consciousness, modes. Now, have we understood that being Brahmanical is going to require simplicity? You cannot have a complex arrangement, because once you start having complex arrangements in life, then the Brahmanical platform becomes very shaky. Why? Because it requires passion to maintain. So a Brahmana has to have a simple lifestyle if that is what their aspiration is. If you want to be Brahmanical, you need a simple lifestyle. Now let's look at what is being given for the Kshatriyas. Dynamic power, bodily strength, determination, heroism, tolerance, generosity, great endeavor, steadiness, devotion to the Brahmanas. devotion to the Brahmanas and leadership are the natural qualities of the Kshatriyas. So here it is being shown that the Kshatriya themselves have to be very generous. They have to have bodily strength. They have to have determination. But the important quality is they have to be subservient to the Brahmanas. They have to take counsel from the Brahmanas and execute their mission. So this idea that Brahmanical knowledge is important, Shastra is important, and the Brahmanas have to be protected, and the Brahmanas have to be given their place in society, and the knowledge which the Brahmana possesses is actually very, very critical for progress. All of these thoughts are a Kshatriya thought because they draw from it. They don't feel they have to dominate the Brahmanas. Proper Kshatriyas, they don't feel they have to dominate them. They know that the Brahmana self-exists. Okay? The Brahmana exists in harmony. They know that. They don't need to dominate the Brahmanas. You see, when I was, I think last year, when I was in Germany, I got this Bhagavatam verse, which I gave a class on Bhagavatam, and it's on my website. It is about creating wealth. You see? And that class was about Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport from the Srimad Bhagavatam that class was about how a Brahmana is receiving what basically the Brahmana has already given what he's receiving. So how is this so? A Brahmana is performing austerities. He is engaging in serious sadhana. As a consequence, he has a wide, large storage of pious reactions, punya. You see, he has accumulated a lot of spiritual credit. He has accumulated a lot of credit because of his austerities. You need credits, punya, and that punya is what gets transformed into dollars. In the previous lifetime, we have accumulated those credits, and in this lifetime, we have the ability to cash in. So let's look at it in a very simple way. Everybody has desires. Why is it that some desires are fulfilled, and why is it that some desires are not fulfilled? Why is a desire fulfilled, and why is a desire not fulfilled? Because there are desires which don't get fulfilled every time. We find that happening in our lives. We desire certain things and we find it's not happening. So why is it that sometimes desires get fulfilled and sometimes they don't? What is the underlying quality of a desire being fulfilled? Deserving. Huh?
Deserving.
No. What else?
I remember reading in another book. We deserve so many things, but we don't deserve.
We don't deserve it. Okay, but I'm asking, what is it which makes us deserve it? Pious credits. You see, if you've already earned pious credits, then you have the ability to encash those pious credits. When you have desires plus pious credits results in manifestation in the physical world. You have desires and you have a storage of pious credits. The combination results in a physical manifestation. So there is a pious credit, and then you're desiring, automatically it gets transferred. If someone has great ability, then they have the ability to immediately manifest. You read in the Srimad Bhagavatam about Kardama Muni. Sri Kardama Muni, when he wanted to start a family, he created an entire palace. He created all kinds of things with his yogic power. So where is this whole ability to create coming from? It comes because the pious credits have been accumulated, and then he is desiring and he is creating. You see? Does it make sense that you have to accumulate subtle wealth before you can make physical wealth? It has to be subtle first. That is the reason why we talk about acts such as charity. We talk about, acts such as being benevolent and so on and so forth. Now, in the case of a Brahmana, does he have more pious credits than others? Yes or no? Yes, because they're constantly engaging in activity which allows them to accumulate pious credits. So when he goes and wants to receive something from the Kshatriya, let us say a Brahmana is wanting a cow. He wants a cow. You read about it in Shastra that he went and approached the king for a cow. So why is it that the king is giving the Brahmana the cow? Because the Brahmana has pious credits he takes a portion of those pious credits. He blesses the king with those pious credits. It is all in the subtle level. Because of that blessing, the king receives the spiritual credits from the Brahmana, and he is able to give him the physical manifestation of wealth. Does it make sense? So the Brahmana is not begging in the literal sense, because he has already created it. And then when he is giving, he is blessing the other person with those credits, and they are giving him physical articles. Does it make sense? So the old Shastric version is, the king is not allowed to take from the Brahmanas. It's very simple. You understand? Even the king is not allowed to tax them. No taxes on the Brahmanas. He cannot approach them. The king is not allowed to take from the Brahmanas. He can take from the Vaishyas. He doesn't even charge taxes for the Shudra. Shastrically, only the businessmen are charged tax because they have wealth. They have the ability to provide taxes for the king. Does it make sense as to how the Varna works? So the Brahmana is not begging. He already has created spiritual wealth. Not spiritual wealth, I would say pious credits. Okay? He has created pious credits. And these pious credits allow him to be able to encash those pious credits without any fault. Does it make sense? Okay, so he is running very smoothly. He is not begging. Even though from an external perspective, it appears as if he is begging. So what is the strength of a Brahmana? He is austere. Why is austerity considered to be a strength? Why is austerity considered to be a strength? Not only that, austerity is considered a strength for the Brahmana because there's uncertainty as to whether he can have a meal today or tomorrow. Someone who is going out to beg may get only a handful of rice. They may get a basket of rice. They may get nothing. So this austerity shouldn't agitate the mind where he stops his nitya karma. He stops his duties. So that's why the Brahmana is considered to be austere, because he has to have the ability to go through this uncertainty of not receiving food. A Brahmana can fast. A Brahmana has the ability to fast. They can fast. Someone in the mode of goodness, they won't be agitated much by fasting. They can fast. Kshatriyas cannot fast because there's too much passion in the body and there's too much fire. They cannot fast. It's very difficult for them to fast. We read about in the Mahabharata where Bhima had such difficulty because, he had such difficulty in fasting because he was such a ferocious fighter and he had so much Agni in him that he had absolutely no capacity to remain without food, because a Kshatriya, he cannot fast. Kshatriyas would find it very difficult to do fasting. They agitate themselves. It's very difficult for them. No. That's a Brahminical quality. Austerity means it's wealth. So when the Brahmana performs austerity, he obtains pious credits. He does. Does it make sense as to how the Varnas operate? It is so intricately connected that in society, if this intricate connection is established, there is peace. Where the Brahmana, if he is not agitated about tomorrow's meal or something like that, which is where simple arrangements are made, he would go and respectfully he can go and beg. There is not one place in India where you can beg for a meal and you'll be treated with respect, except Vrindavan, Vraj. In Vrajbhumi, you can go to the house of the Vrajvasi and you can ask them for roti, and that is the only place where they would fully appreciate you and they would say, please come. They would make you sit and then they would give you what is required. It is the only place in India. Nowhere else can you go and beg for roti. They will make you sit, they will go make things, it is fresh, and they would bring, and then they would also give you sabji and whatever is required. I've had that experience where I've seen the eagerness with which they want to feed. These are very simple cowherd men. They're very simple cowherd men, very simple Brajvasis. They're not rich. They're very simple people, but they have this quality where they're very eager to share and give when someone is asking. They feed you with a lot of love. There's only place. Nowhere else can you do this. And anywhere else, they'll call you a beggar. They would probably, they would give you food which is rotten. In Braj, they cook fresh when you ask them. You see? You can just go and ask them, whether there's roti. And they will cook, they'll make the roti, they'll give you whatever is required, whatever dahi they have, whatever it is, they'll just give it to you so that you can have it there. You see? It's the quality of Braj, which is very amazing. So now we have understood the Brahminical quality which is required. The Kshatriya quality, on the other hand, very important, is that the Kshatriya is able to appreciate knowledge and he is generous. It will kill a Kshatriya to receive charity. If someone has the mood of wanting to take from others, even in the mood of charity, that person is not a Kshatriya. A Kshatriya cannot be given charity. They would not be able to withstand the insult of putting themselves in an inferior position of receiving from someone. They are supposed to give. In the Mahabharata, we again see the activity of Karna. Excellent qualities of Kshatriya is that he practically would never refuse if anybody were to ask. That is a Kshatriya quality. It's superlative. Kshatriyas cannot refuse. If someone comes and asks them for alms, they will not refuse. And they will also be subservient to the Brahmanas. They will be subservient to the proper Kshatriyas. They will be subservient because they know that even though the Brahmana is weak in body, they have the ability to control them. The mode of goodness can control the mode of passion. It is not about physical strength. The mode of goodness is the higher mode. It can control the mode of passion. It can manage the mode of passion. That's why the Brahmanas have the ability to control the Kshatriyas, because the mode they are in, which is the mode of goodness, has the ability to control the mode of passion. Okay? Very important to understand. Yes?
So can the pious credits be passed to someone else?
Can it be passed to someone else? Yes, you can. You can offer prayers on behalf of others. Say, for example, if someone is ill, then one can offer prayers on behalf of someone else so that they can receive the blessings.
So in that case, your pious credits go.
It will be reduced. I receive requests like this many a time, all the time, from different people around the world where they go through some intense situations and they need help. So you give them that help. You can offer prayers and then they receive help. This is actually the duty of someone who is playing this role of Brahmanical role. They have to be able to do this. They have to have the ability to offer prayers and assist those who are in need in certain ways. So credits can be given. The point which we're trying to talk about is that we'll talk about it more when we come to Vaishnava Dharma. But even when we receive initiation, the spiritual master gives us so much support. Without his support, we can't chant. He gives us so much support. So it is his benediction which actually allows us to be able to move forward. His desire, his orders carry the power. His orders carry the power for us to be able to execute our sadhana. So he is giving. But then there is an unlimited source, which is coming all the way from Lord Chaitanya to Lord Nityananda to the spiritual master. So he is connected to an unlimited source, and he's making himself, an instrument, naimittika. Yeah, he's like an instrument. He's an instrument. He is, in one sense, Sevaka Bhagavan. You are serving Krishna through the spiritual master. At the same time, the spiritual master basically is coming through and he's giving what is required. This is to be understood. So the point which we're trying to make is that prayers are very important. Vaishnavas can pray for other Vaishnavas. You often see this happening all the time, where someone is sick and then they ask for help, or someone is in a dire situation, they ask for help. So Vaishnavas praying for other Vaishnavas is a must. It is very important to do that in principle if someone is writing. Does it make sense? So you can give. And once it is received, you can even redistribute. So this understanding is all about your desire. If you have power enough, you can redistribute. Yeah.
So going back to that, you said some desires are fulfilled and some are not. So the one that are not fulfilled, is it because that we did not have done any pious thing in the past?
It is because there are several aspects. If you are engaging in devotional service, there will be aspects of your life which will be granted, and there are aspects of your life which may not be granted based on what is suitable for you and what is not suitable for you. So that's one way of understanding it. You might simply not have the karmic, I would say, arrangement for you to obtain those desires. So sometimes you have to be very careful that if those desires themselves have nothing to do with your Nitya Dharma, then be very careful in desiring those. There's also an important aspect. Understand what is your eternal duty. If you have desires which are outside of your eternal duty, understand that you are heading on something which is a very, it's like skating on thin ice. It's very exciting, but if the ice breaks and it cracks, the chances are that people could drown, they could get hurt very badly. So we should be very careful in desiring things if you're not clear. You see, anything outside of Nitya Dharma, desiring it is not clear. That is the topic of the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is all about being able to desire properly. That is the education. We'll come to it. So, generosity, great endeavor, steadiness, devotion to the Brahmanas, and leadership are the natural qualities of the Kshatriyas. They are attracted to Dharma. Kshatriyas are attracted to Dharma. Brahmanas generally are attracted to the moksha principle. Yeah. Now let's look at Vaishya Varna, the third Varna. Okay. Faith in Vedic civilization. There has to be faith in Vedic civilization, which essentially means they have to believe in the arrangement of Varnashram Dharma. Faith in Vedic civilization, faith in the establishment of temples and so on. This is Vedic civilization propounding. The Vaishyas, the business class, they need to have this. Dedication to charity. This is a critical aspect of being someone who falls in the category of the Vaishya Dharma. Dedication to charity. Freedom from hypocrisy. Service to the Brahmanas. And perpetually desiring to accumulate more money are the natural qualities of the Vaishyas. Perpetually desiring to accumulate more money. One has to recognize this. If this particular quality exists in our mind, that we are perpetually wanting to accumulate more and more wealth, then understand what is the Varna that we belong to. Don't cheat ourselves in thinking that we are Brahmanas. Don't cheat ourselves thinking we have different quality. This wealth is a factor in the mind. Understand this is the third category. We belong to that. Once we understand that we belong to the Vaishya Varna, then we have to follow the tenets of the Vaishya Varna, which is extraordinary level of charity. There has to be a lot of charity. There has to be, what else? Service to the Brahmanas and perpetually desiring to accumulate more money and natural qualities. So basically, dedication to charity. They're literally saying you have to dedicate yourself to charity. Literally. Now let's talk about Shudras. Service without duplicity to the Brahmanas. See, all the Varnas are supposed to serve the Brahmanas. The Kshatriyas receive inspiration. Every other Varna has to serve the Brahmanas. Why? Because it is the head. Shastric knowledge comes from the Brahmanas, and the Brahmanas have the ability to give blessings. If you are a businessman, how much time are you going to spend in your sadhana? Almost none. Almost none. Because you're constantly going to be agitated with your business decisions, because you have to be in passion to manage your business. If you're not in passion, the business will collapse. You have to be able to maintain it, increase it. There's such agitation in the mind that they don't have the ability to sit still and be able to chant and be able to accumulate credits. The credits have to be given by the Brahmanas. So the Vaishyas, the businessmen, they basically will have to donate to the Brahmanas a cow and so on. They receive abundance of blessings. With those blessings, they have the ability to do their business as well. Wealth is given to them by the mode of goodness. You see, it's a very simple way of understanding. Wealth equals mode of goodness. Sattva equals wealth. It's a fact. Wealth equals mode of goodness. Resources, being able to maintain those resources, it requires the mode of goodness. The destruction that we see in society today of corporations, and we see corporations, individuals, and so on, the destruction that we see is because the modes they are operating on is largely the mode of ignorance. You can't really maintain it. You see? You can't maintain a corporation unless you have Brahmanical skills and you have the mode of goodness involved at some level. It is required. The corporations have to become charitable. They have to be connected to charities. They have to be connected to real wisdom. It is not happening, right? There's no agenda these days other than wanting to accumulate money. So you have crisis occurring every few years because there is no direction. You cannot maintain wealth. Wealth is not maintained unless there is a mode of goodness. Sattva is required to maintain. It's a very simple fact. Sattva is required to maintain. You can't maintain it otherwise. Maintenance is not easy. Preservation requires sattva. You need it. Have you noticed that if you have very pure teachings, they get preserved over millions and millions and millions of years? Why is it so? It is because they're very pure. They are above the material mode of goodness. And teachings that are in the lower modes and knowledge which comes from the lower modes, they get destroyed over the course of time. They constantly change. In the 2007-2008 financial crisis, many business school professors, they wanted to rewrite their own books because they said that our philosophy has failed. There were statements which were made by many of them. Their philosophy had failed. Foundational philosophy of how to run a corporation and what the objective should be in the economy, that had failed. Many of them felt that they wanted to go back and rewrite their own stuff. Why is it constantly changing? It is changing because it is not in the mode of goodness. The higher mode of goodness, which is Shuddha Sattva, transcendental truth, millions of years you can pass on that knowledge. It will not get distorted. It will not get distorted. You see, there's a simple principle. You know this Mahakaleshwar temple in Ujjain? In Ujjain, you have Lord Shiva as a Jyotirling, Mahakaleshwar. So Mahakaleshwar essentially means the time factor. He controls the time factor, Kala. His consort is Kalika, Mother Kali, right? What is the whole purpose? The idea is to preserve Vedic scripture from deterioration. Those deities preserve Vedic scripture from deterioration because they preserve knowledge from deterioration over millenniums. Quite significant that Krishna's original teaching, Sandipani Ashram, was in Ujjain. Yeah, that is where Krishna went for Gurukul. It's quite significant that Ujjain, that deity in Ujjain, Mahakaleshwar, is the preserver of the eternal truth of the Vedas. He is. He preserves that, so that the mode of ignorance doesn't sully it, doesn't get into it, doesn't interfere with it. So that is why he is worshipped. There are different reasons why different deities are worshipped in India, especially the ancient ones. So this is the reason for worshipping this Mahakaleshwar deity, is to preserve Vedic knowledge. The time factor, he is the time. What is it which destroys everything? It is time. So how do you preserve something beyond years and years and years? That is the function of Lord Shiva, the time factor. So it's above. He preserves it. So it is considered to be the seat of Vedic knowledge in many ways. That's what? Ujjain. Yes.
How does he do that? How does he do that? I mean, he has books or...
No, not so much. He controls the mode of ignorance from interfering. He controls. He basically allows the mode of goodness. He preserves. He does not allow the mode of ignorance to interfere. So the preservation is also a function of Lord Shiva. He preserves it as well. Even though he destroys, he is preserving aspects of scripture which are timeless. Vedic scripture which are timeless. There's an aspect to it. You see? Someone needs to control those who can distort scripture. So he protects them. He protects the scripture. He protects Vedic teachings. So that's why that is the importance of the deity. Ignorance itself is nothing but forgetting, isn't it? Would you not have a simple definition that ignorance is just forgetting? How many times have we heard the basic teachings of Krishna consciousness? Every class, practically. Do we remember that? Why is it that we are failing to implement the most basic teachings when we have heard it 1,000,000 times? So there is an intrinsic quality of ignorance within us which is clouding our judgment, isn't it? We are not able to prioritize. We constantly make wrong decisions. We're constantly looking for reasons to, make adjustments here and there to make life more wonderful. But then we keep hearing, we're forgetting. We also forget. This is the mode of ignorance, you see. This is very important for us to understand that this is how it works. So this ignorance is being suppressed. Right? Once the ignorance is being suppressed, then the truth can be preserved. It's like a preservative, yeah? So that is what it is. So the idea is that if there is going to be Mahapralaya, at the end of Lord Brahma's day, when the lower planetary systems are all destroyed, including this planet, then you still need to preserve certain truths. That function of preservation within destruction is done by the time factor as well. The time factor can't influence certain things. That function is Lord Shiva's function as well. He preserves in certain ways.
Is Mahapralaya means like the planet is like destroyed, or
It's inundated. Yeah, it is, because its water covers everything. There's severe blazing sun. Basically, at the end of Lord Brahma's day, at the end of every Lord Brahma's day, end of the day, the lower planetary systems are destroyed. They're rebuilt again the next morning. They just lost one day. In the night, they get destroyed. They get destroyed. They are rebuilt again. Then there is this Mahapralaya, which is the final dissolution, where the entire creation is dissolved. That's a different aspect of it. So all of this is done for this purpose. It is like, for example, that you buy Sculpey clay and you give it to your child, and your child is using Sculpey clay to create something, and then the child sees that I haven't really quite done what I'm supposed to do. It mashes up the Sculpey clay and starts all over again. For Lord Shiva, the demigods, that is what it is. They look and see if the mode of ignorance has reached such a point where no help can be given. The destruction begins automatically. Immediately they'll start destroying, because they know that nothing more can be done. It cannot be salvaged. That's why we see as the Yuga progresses, Kali Yuga progresses, it becomes more and more and more intense. So once it reaches a point of intensity where it can't be fixed, then you have Lord Kalki come in, where there's destruction. You see? That they destroy because they understand that these bodies which have been given to us, they can't be used as proper vehicles because the environment is completely contaminated. You can't. It's the whole environment is contaminated. Everything is contaminated. They can't really move forward. The soul cannot progress, destroy, and start all over again, like Sculpey. Quite fascinating, but that is what it is. For them, it is a matter of reconstituting the Sculpey clay and then remodeling it into a new shape. That's what it is.
so is Kalki of the level?
I do not know, but that is the end of Kali Yuga, and he will bring Satya Yuga by suppressing the mode of ignorance. So he will bring in a new dawn of an era where there will be new leadership, new everything. So that's going to require destruction at some level. There's no doubt. But then we are talking about, we're only 5,000 years into Kali Yuga. So we're only 5,000 years, and then there are 432,000 overall. Yeah. So it's 432 or 424? 432. So we still have a lot of time. You want to be around? Okay. So, service without duplicity to the Brahmanas, cows, devas, and other worshipable personalities, and complete satisfaction with whatever income is obtained in such service are the natural qualities of the Shudras. The Shudras have to be satisfied with whatever is obtained. They have to be satisfied. And this satisfaction, if it doesn't exist, then there are problems. Now, let's look at a definition of people who do not belong to the four varnas. Uncleanliness, dishonesty, thievery, faithlessness, useless quarrel, lust, anger, and hankering constitute the nature of those in the lowest position outside the varnashram system. This practically is everyone, isn't it? Right. This is practically everyone. We are talking about practically everyone here. So outside of the Vedic system is everyone. So it's quite a dangerous proposition because you practically have most of the population in the category where they can't even be classified as one of the varnas, not even Shudras. They can't even have Shudra propensities because they're not peaceful and they don't respect the Brahmanas, they don't respect Vedic civilization. They don't. They're agitated all the time. Yeah? Now, this is Swadharma. Do we understand the word Swadharma now? This is Swadharma. Swadharma is conditioning because of being placed in a body, because of being placed in an environment. There is a certain propensity that will arise in us, which can be classified into one of the four varnas, and that is called Swadharma. It can be classified into one of the ashramas as well, depending on which ashram we choose, what objectives we have. This is Swadharma. What is it which Krishna talks about Swadharma in the 3rd chapter? How do you execute Karma Yoga as defined by Krishna in the 3rd chapter? Now we defined it. Let's look and see what is the recommendation for this. We are not even close to defining Vaishnav Dharma now. Do you understand? Don't get confused. We are literally talking about Vedic Dharma. We're talking about a very, very rudimentary form of Dharma, which is defined as something which is defined as the activity that you perform because of your propensities, that which is a part of who you are. So don't get confused that they're not talking about Vaishnava Dharma yet. Swadharma is that which you do based on your propensities. Now let's see what Krishna wants us to do based on a propensity. Krishna is saying you have propensity. You are in a certain varna. You have a certain occupation. You are engaging in certain activities. Let us see what Krishna is saying about how to do it. Okay? This is very important. Devotees, if you do not perform Swadharma with the objective of gaining knowledge, it can be very contaminating. And we have to understand what is knowledge. That is what is the topic of the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It is being defined. Let's look at it. So, I'm reading text 15 of the 3rd chapter. Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. They're basically saying that all the four varnas and the ashrams have duties, sacrifice. They have to perform them. Now, 16. My dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice, thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads a life full of sin. Living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain. So here the definition is being given. The Vaishya is supposed to give charity. The Kshatriya is supposed to be adherent to the vows of the Brahmanas. The Brahmana is supposed to live in a certain quality. The Shudra is supposed to do certain things. So every one of them have a certain function of sacrifice which has to be performed based on their varna and ashram. If you don't do it, then you accumulate sin. You're off the sin. Now, how many of us have identified our varna and ashram? Ashram, yes, clearly. But how about varna? Be very clear. Don't say that. Think about it. Be very clear as to whether you're performing duties of that particular varna. Have you identified and have you done it? Are you performing duties of the varna?
Mixed.
Huh? It cannot be mixed. I'm saying everybody is mixed. It is not defined. Do you understand how complex it is? When you start talking about Swadharma, once you're put in a certain body and you develop a certain conditioning, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that if you don't perform your duty according to the Swadharma, you're going to accumulate sin, which is given here. My dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice, thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads a life full of sin. Can you understand how dangerous it is in human life? Either you follow the rules and regulations of Varnashram, or you follow in the footsteps of Bhagavad Dharma, which is Vaishnava Dharma. If you're not going to do either of these, it's a calamitous situation. Please understand it. We all have families. You all have family members. And you will clearly see that they are neither there nor here. They're in between. Do you understand? They're nowhere. They are somewhat in either, they're neither following the rules based on the Varnashram, neither are they on the side of Bhagavad Dharma. They are stuck in between. Have you identified this? Krishna is very clear. He says that if you're not going to be doing this, you're going to be living a life full of sin. Essentially, this is a condemnation which is given in the 3rd chapter. Please understand, this is a critical topic. That is why I chose this, and I wanted to build it into a module which I can preach as seminars. This is a critical topic because we read the Bhagavad Gita hundreds of times, but we really don't understand properly that there's a certain import of what is required. We have to understand this whole function of Dharma. Do we understand how perilous it is to exist in the planet and not be in either the path of Krishna consciousness given by Mahaprabhu or following Swadharma? And when I say path of Krishna consciousness, everybody has to cooperate with Mahaprabhu. It does not matter which particular aspect it is, because he is the Yuga Dharma avatar. Every river has to flow into the ocean of Mahaprabhu. It has to, which is the definition of Yuga avatar. It has to. It has to support it. It has to be supported where eventually it has to come to the point of falling into and then accumulating and assimilating with the ocean of Mahaprabhu's movement. It is a fact. It is defining, which is what Srila Prabhupada said, that we have to be the Brahmanas. Did Srila Prabhupada really think that everyone in our society is going to be a Brahmana? Be clear. The answer is no. There is no illusion such as that. Brahmana meaning someone who is going to engage in Brahmanical duty. No, because there are devotees who are with business propensity. There are Vaishnavas with business propensity. There are Vaishnavas with Brahmanical propensity. There are Vaishnavas with Shudra propensities. There are Vaishnavas with Kshatriya propensities. On the Vaishnava platform, they're all on the same level. Krishna's eyes, he does not discriminate the Shudra Vaishnava from the Brahmana Vaishnava. Krishna's eyes, there is no discrimination. So in our society, there really isn't, in one sense, discrimination in terms of opportunity to advance in Krishna consciousness based on Varnashram. No, there isn't. Everybody, the Grahasthas, the Sannyasis, Vanaprasth, Brahmachari, they all have equal opportunity in terms of following and being able to move forward. Our society is not based on that. There is Vaishnava Dharma, it's Nitya Dharma, it's very different. But what did Srila Prabhupada really mean by saying that our society has to be a society of Brahmanas? What did he mean by that? He meant that our society has to function as the teacher and the guide for the rest of the world. All the rivers in the world have to flow into the ocean, which is Mahaprabhu's mission. It has to. So when you start performing the function of being a proper devotee, when we perform the function of being a proper Vaishnava, then we have the ability to influence others because there's power. Mahaprabhu blesses us. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us that opportunity. Okay? So now, are we clear, Matajis and Prabhus, that there is an issue here? Krishna is saying, if you don't follow that, you're going to be following sinful. You're going to be sinful. Now, let's look at the next verse. But for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of self-realization, and who is satisfied in the self only, fully satiated, for him there is no duty. There is no duty for one who is fully satiated, who is following a path of self-realization, which essentially means that for him there is Nitya Dharma, Dharma which is associated with the idea of developing and having a knowledge of the complete relationship with the Lord. For him, there is no duty defined by Varnashram, saying that particular duty of Varnashram, it becomes subservient. There are devotees who may never take second initiation, who have received Harinam Diksha. Do they have the ability to go back to Godhead? Harinam is enough. You don't need second initiation. So you may not take Brahmanical Diksha, but have the ability to go back to Godhead. So our system is not dependent on being classified. Our Vaishnava Dharma is not dependent on anything other than chanting of the holy names. It is not dependent on anything else, just the chanting of the holy names. Harinam is all we need to go back to Godhead. We are not dependent on any other arrangement. Does it make sense? So for one who is situated in the self, he is already above the modes. Does it make sense? If you are situated in the self, if you're situated above the material mode of goodness, are you not situated in Shuddha Sattva? The relationship is still developing with the Lord, but you're above the modes. When you're above the modes, what is the point in engaging in duty which is going to purify you of the modes? All duty is to purify us of the modes of nature. When one is situated above the modes, there is no duty, which is what Krishna is saying. Does it make sense? If you're above the modes, there is no duty because you're already purified. But if you're a Vaishya, then you need to get out of the passion ignorance into passion, into goodness. You need to be able to practice that. This is Varnashrama. In the Vaishnava Dharma, in Krishna consciousness, there is no need for us to think that you have to move from ignorance to passion to ignorance to passion. One can very quickly accelerate because of the power of the holy names and the mercy of the Vaishnavas. One can quickly accelerate. But in a Varnashram, why is the Varnashram there? The Shudra graduates in the subsequent lifetime to become a Vaishya. From ignorance, they become passion ignorance. Subsequent lifetime, because they're executing their duties wonderfully in that particular Varna, then they graduate to become Kshatriyas. Then they graduate to become Brahmanical. What are they graduating from? They're graduating from the lower modes to the higher modes. For one who is situated in the self, he is above the modes. So how can there be duty? Does this make sense? Yes or no? So this whole idea is that can take an entire lifetime for one from going from Shudra to Vaishya. Then from there to, something, maybe the telephone is ringing. Okay? Does it make sense, devotees, that how one is situated in the self? Yes.
Even while executing devotional service, we can see the under the modes, right?
Of course. Of course. But then we are already on the royal path of devotion. Ours is a matter of time. It's like enrolling into a school. You either have to enroll in the school of Varnashrama or you enroll in the school of Krishna consciousness. Once you're enrolled, there could be certain improvements that have to be made, but you're already on the path, which essentially means that there is a certain time when you will reach your goal. In Varnashram, one is not executing the duties properly. Slowly, steadily, they receive advice and they keep improving upon it. They spend an entire lifetime being a proper Shudra. Then they have an opportunity to graduate from the mode of ignorance to the mode of passion ignorance, the next level. So for them, there is duty. If you don't perform your duties according to this, then you don't graduate subsequently, isn't it? See, this propensity will not be there. When we say graduate, we're not talking about opportunity. We're talking about propensity. This will not be there in the subsequent lifetime. Someone who is constantly doing what he's supposed to do as a Shudra, then he will have this opportunity to develop and move from being a Shudra to someone who is a creator of wealth and distributor of wealth, being a Vaishya, the next level. Do you understand? This is a gradual scale, yes.
Prabhuji, can a Shudra and Vaishya, they can be devotees also?
Of course.
Because first ignorance and then they have to go to passion, then goodness and then...
We are not talking about devotees now. We are talking about Swadharma based on conditioning. Do we understand? We just have to have a very firm grasp of the third chapter. We are talking about Swadharma based on conditioning. How do you purify this? Which is what I'm going to talk about in a few minutes and we'll end there. How are you going to purify based on the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita? Now let's read the next few verses. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. So, a Brahmana is going to be judged in a completely different way compared to the Kshatriya, compared to the Vaishya, and compared to the Shudra. Why? Because the Brahmana has power. Prabhus, Haribol, you are going to be judged on a completely different standard compared to Mataji's. First initiated devotees are going to be judged on a completely different standard compared to people who are not initiated. If you're second initiated, different standard. The point I'm trying to make is that this verse is just not a general verse. It basically says that there is a hierarchy of opportunity, and if you don't take advantage of that particular opportunity, you don't set an example, and the family starts going, awry, the family starts failing in their spiritual practices, the husband is going to be held responsible. Okay? There's husband by body and there's also husband by psychology. That's a different story. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. There can be husbands by psychology also. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going there, but I'm just really saying husband is going to be held responsible. Because sometimes you will find that irrespective of the body, there could be propensities which are very different. We see it very commonly. But then what I'm trying to say is, being in a male body then has certain responsibilities. Krishna is basically saying here that if you are a Brahmana, then you have greater responsibility than the Shudras. And the failure of Dharma, the failure of and collapse of the Vedic system, it is entirely on the Brahmanas. They don't look at Shudras and say the Shudras did this and because of which the Vedic system collapsed. The Brahmanas went off track. Because the Brahmanas failed in their duties, everything collapsed. Have that understanding, which is what Krishna is trying to say in this verse. Text 22. O son of Pritha, there is no work prescribed for me within all three planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor have I a need to obtain anything, and yet I am engaged in prescribed duties. So he's setting an example. I'm a king. I'm a Kshatriya. Krishna is a Kshatriya. So I have to do my duties in a certain way because by observation, people are going to learn from me and they're going to quote me. They're going to say that he did it, so I'm doing it. 23. For if I ever fail to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, certainly all men would follow my path. Basically, these verses are saying, don't be sentimental when it comes to prescribed duties. If there are rules and regulations to Swadharma, do not be sentimental, which is what Krishna is saying. It is not a matter of sentiment for you to choose to do something which you like to do and choose to reject something which you want to reject. We are all like that at some level. We accept things which are comfortable and we reject things that are uncomfortable. Krishna says it's not a matter of you accepting and rejecting. It is not sentimental. If I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put to ruination. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. As the ignorant perform their duties with attachment to results, critical. This is the verse we have to pay attention to when it comes to Swadharma. As the ignorant perform their duties with attachment to results, the learned may similarly act, but without attachment for the sake of leading people on the right path. This is a critical verse. When one is performing Swadharma, when one is engaging in activity based on their propensities, the purification that one attains is the ability to perform the duty without attachment to results. Please understand, this is Gyan. There is attachment because of which I'm acting in certain ways. The purification that you attain by properly performing duties is to perform duties for the sake of performing duties. That is the graduation point of the Shudra to the Vaishya. If the Shudra performs his duties without attachment to results, he will graduate. If the Vaishya performs duties without attachment to results, he will graduate. Brahmana, likewise. Do you understand? This hierarchy which is being established is perform your duties without attachment to results. This is actually Gyan, knowledge. So this duty, which is done without attachment, is purifying. Did we not see in the Ramayana, Kshatriya Dharma, such intense Kshatriya Dharma, intense. He was so particular about everything, following the strictures of the father. What is the duty of a son? Maryada Purushottam. What is the duty of a son? So strict, so strict. Did he say sentimentally that, this is not okay, that is not okay? No, he just went and did what he was supposed to do in an extraordinarily strict fashion. This is Swadharma. You see, Lord Ram set an extraordinary example. At every step, did you see how much evaluation went on? When you read the Ramayana, there's so much evaluation in terms of what to do, what not to do. Then how about as a husband to Mother Sita whilst being a king of Ayodhya, where he sent Mother Sita away? There was some judgment which was made by him, which was based on his duty as a king. He understood that the duty of a king is superior to the duty of a husband towards a wife. So, similar fashion, Krishna is saying those who are in leadership, those who are leading, great men, they have to perform their duties very carefully. Did Lord Ram do it? So, the point we are trying to make is there is no sentiment involved and there is no comfort involved. There is no attachment to a certain kind of outcome. Do you understand? You perform your duty without any attachment to the outcome, and that is the purification of the ashram. That is the purification of the varna. Does it make sense? This is Swadharma. This is the third chapter. Karma Yoga is all about performing without attachment to results. That is the purification which would allow one to graduate. So this is Swadharma. Any questions?
But in today's world, it's difficult.
Which is exactly what I'm trying to say here. That yes, it is difficult, but you do it without attachment to results.
So how to identify what is your Swadharma based on?
I'm sorry?
How to identify?
How do you identify Swadharma?
What is your Swadharma? What is the Swadharma?
There are very clear propensities. The way, there are two different levels. Number one, for us to be able to identify our nature. Our nature, if it is identified by us, then we have to plan according to that nature. The propensity in today's world is to do things based on what the neighbors are doing. I'm being motivated by my neighbor. I'm being motivated by my brother, who probably is not of the same nature as I am. I'm being motivated by a cousin who is of probably a different nature altogether. The motivation in today's world has nothing to do with scripture. It has nothing to do with even what is my nature, how to act upon it, so that eventually I can graduate. Right? Everybody wants to do what everybody else wants to do. There's a certain crowd philosophy here, which everybody wants to go like a herd. You know, that is the reason why today's world, you don't even have varnashram operating. You don't. If there are problems in anybody's life, it is because they are not following Shastric principles. It's a fact. If they have understood Shastric principles of duties in the ashram, duties in the varna, their problems will go away.
So how to find those things?
Yeah, those things are already there. As do you report to him? Yeah. Do you sit and stand and sit down when he says you have to do it? Not literally.
Sometimes.
Not literally. Yes or no?
Yes.
This is Shudra Varna, isn't it? Yeah? This is exactly what everybody else is.
But we cannot oppose.
No, we don't need to. We just have to do our duty. But the point I'm trying to make is, in today's world, everybody is in the Shudra Varna because literally we are imposed upon by circumstances. It's almost an impractical arrangement, which is the reason why people struggle. You see? It's a very, very big struggle for devotees as well because they are all in situations which are not conducive overall for long-term abilities. Overall, what happens is over a long period of time, it erodes your ability to function as devotees even, to chant and so on, because you're in an unnatural condition. You're constantly being imposed upon. So for Brahmana, for example, is being imposed upon to become a Shudra, then he's going to be very uncomfortable, psychologically, emotionally. So finding a duty and finding a role is very important. To have the ability and the power to fit ourselves into that particular role, that requires credits. And those credits normally are not available. That's why there's so much confusion. Those credits become available when we start desiring Krishna consciousness. And we only want to chant, and we want to chant, and we want to be able to serve. Everything else falls in place automatically because there's power in Krishna consciousness. Do you understand what I'm saying? That if we have the objective of following in Mahaprabhu's, the teachings of Mahaprabhu, arrangements are being made, which makes life easier. Do you understand? A lot of what is happening to us is already being arranged because we are a part of Mahaprabhu's movement. Otherwise, our lives will be very, very different and more difficult than you can even imagine.
But you just said that most of the problems are because people are not following the Shastric principles. So, but we have to keep those principles also in the mind, or maybe we should know also those principles. Sometimes we don't know even.
Which is the first point. The point I'm trying to make is that if you want to follow Varnashram, it's very intricate, it's very difficult. You're going to see what is easier to follow. I'm presenting philosophy to you, understanding that this is expected of you. So there is no choice. The point I'm trying to make here is that Krishna consciousness is not a matter of choice. There is no freedom if you're not going to be in Bhagavad Dharma. Otherwise, you have to follow Varnashram. And when you have to follow Varnashram, there's a degradation. Getting a human birth is very difficult these days. It might seem philosophically or even as a statement quite absurd, given that we have 6.5 billion people on the planet and with births occurring every minute in different parts of the world. In reality, there are also countless billions of souls who are still wanting to come into this world to execute their karma, and they don't have the specific karmic patterns which they have to inherit so that they can particularly come and execute that and take on human bodies. Do you understand what I'm saying? On an average, our pious relatives spend at least 15 years, 20 years as ghosts. Don't be surprised. I'm making a statement saying even someone who has led a normal life in different parts of India and different places, they end up not getting a human body because the complex arrangement which is required for today's body is very different. They don't have that pattern these days. Those days, it was a very clear classification of Varnashram. You had Brahmana, you had Kshatriya, Shudra, Vaishya. If someone passed away and they had propensities, you go into one of those categories. Today, you tell me what is clear. There's nothing which is clear in the industrial age. Do you see an increase of population? Have this understanding. You see, we operate in a vacuum. We can't think normally because we operate in a vacuum. In reality, the population increase that has been witnessed happened after the Industrial Revolution. Have you seen it? There's been very little graduation in the classroom. Everybody comes to the 5th grade and they stop. Imagine what is the size of the 5th grade classroom if there is no one going from 5th to 6th, because only one student goes every year. Can you imagine this? They are not progressing further because they are not moving further according to this. Opportunities are getting lesser and lesser for them to make progress. So where do you think they're going to be? They're going to come back here, they're going to be in more complex situations. If you think this is complex, if you think the world here is complex, the world beyond this body is 1 billion times more complex. Once we leave the body, the arrangements needed is 1 billion times more complex. If you think a child can get lost in a little, what do you call it? Some kind of a, a fairground. If they have some kind of an amusement park, and you take a child, and the child leaves the parent's hand and gets lost. Has it happened? It happened to me when I was a child. I caught someone else's hand and walked away. Yeah, I did. I remember. I distinctly remember. I caught someone else's hand and I just walked away. And then they realized that I was not their son. I realized they were not my parents and they were searching. This can happen. Do you think children can get lost in a fairground in amusement parks? Imagine space. Imagine space and what a soul will go through when they leave. Can you just imagine how lost they can get if they leave the bodies? Think about the soul. Do not understand. Don't think of it. If you think human beings are finding it so difficult to manage the planet, the same difficulty is there up there too. There's an entire plane of existence where people find it difficult to manage souls who have left their bodies. You understand? Then there's so much pressure on people who are on the planet, on families. See? Please don't underestimate the good fortune of coming in touch with Prabhupada's mission. Just as much as when you began your career, there was this concept of networking. Does everybody agree with networking? Yeah, you need networking. It is always whom you know and how you know them. It's always whom you know and how you know them. In the corporate setting, if you know someone who is well situated, they can take you in and they say, I have a budget, come, I'll give you this role. It can happen very easily. Whom you know and how you know them. the same rule applies outside of this universe as well. It is always whom you know and how you know them. You're not, you shouldn't be living in fiction. Please don't live in fiction. This is not a fictional experience. It's true. Whom you know and how you know them. Just being connected to Srila Prabhupada's mission, being connected to the spiritual masters and to Mahaprabhu is in itself an extraordinary connection which facilitates forward movement. That is the good fortune of devotees in this movement. Once you're not in that movement and you're outside of this movement, you can get lost. Finish. Can you imagine getting lost after leaving the body and billions of souls are waiting? Can you imagine this? Just try visualizing this experience. I'm not throwing a scare in you. This is reality. People can't understand this reality. It is the truth. We dread going to India for sometimes, it's so crowded there that you can practically get jostled. If you're a child or someone can get lost. But then imagine this, outside of this body. Who is it who is going to guide us? Who is it who is going to be able to grant us a specific route? So it's like that. It's always like that. In those days, when you have warlike situations, you had hospitals on the battlefield. And people who used to get treated, they used to get treated based on rank. So if a wounded person comes in, and if he is of a certain rank, then he will receive a certain priority based on someone who is of a lower rank, lower category, because they used to treat value in that way. It's the same circumstance outside of this body as well. Don't underestimate it. It's a very complex circumstance. I'll stop here. I'll take a couple of questions because I was just wanting to summarize the topic of Swadharma. This is a critical understanding because this topic of Swadharma gets mixed up as we go along with Nitya Dharma. It gets mixed up with so many different aspects of it. Do you understand? We talk about Varnashram very regularly sometimes. And then we talk about, our eternal duty. So where is it that we cut a line? Where is it and what is the function of the Vaishnava in terms of their movement? So first you have to understand this concept as given in the Bhagavad Gita of Swadharma, based on the Varnas, based on the ashram, understanding the roles, regulations, understanding how the modes are operating. And then we start looking at what is the opportunity in Vaishnava Dharma in the subsequent session. So any more questions on this? Let me see if I have a couple of more verses I can read. So this verse again. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, O mighty arm, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the difference between work in devotion and work for fruitive results. Work in devotion, work for fruitive results. Again, Krishna is talking about don't become attached to the results. Do your duty, because otherwise there is no purification. So therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. This is the ultimate instruction, but this is basically Vaishnava Dharma. But in reality, the message that is being given by Krishna is that if you want to engage in activity in this world, regular activity, going to work, being in one varna, being in an ashram, do so without attachment for results. This is a fundamental teaching. Why? Because by doing so, without attachment to results, but with the idea of wanting to make progress, one will become purified of their propensities. This is how progress is being made. Right? We need this as well. Regardless of whether we follow Varnashram or do not follow Varnashram, as devotees who are in the Grahasthashram and who are engaging in activities outside, we need to have this understanding of performing activities without attachment for results. We need it. We need to be able to move forward. This is our system. We accept our circumstance, we act upon the circumstance, we don't focus so much upon the results, understanding Krishna is going to control the results. This is our purification. This is Sudharma. It has to be performed. So, critical result, which is being given to Krishna in the next verse. Those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow this teaching faithfully without envy become free from the bondage of fruitive actions. What is bondage, devotees? What is the bondage of fruitive actions? Let's assume that someone is a business person, a Vaishya, and he's going to act according to his propensity. He's going to act in business. He's going to invest. He's going to look, he's going to interact. He's probably going to transact and he's going to make profits. Now, what is bondage which is being caused here?
It's like wanting more and more.
Bondage. Just focus on the word bondage. Bondage means what? Literally translate bondage for me. Bondage means being bound. Yeah? Being bound by ropes. Being bound to a certain circumstance. So what is bondage in the system of Varnashram for the soul? Exactly. Instead of progressing from Shudra to Vaishya to Kshatriya to Brahmana, if you are in the Varnashram and if you are attached to the results that are coming in that particular Varna, you become attached to that particular Varna. You again and again come back into the same Varna. You don't make progress. You understand? This is bondage to results. This is bondage. Krishna is basically saying, if you don't follow this injunction of acting with a sense of duty without attachment to results, you're going to be bound. You're going to be stuck. Is this clear? So, we'll stop here. Basically, yes.
In that verse 20, Krishna says that follow it without envy. Could you please elaborate on that?
Being envious essentially means focusing on what one doesn't have and to the detriment of their own aspect of their existence. So basically, enviousness means that one wants the other person to not exist. They don't want the person to exist. That's why a snake is called envious. Why? Because a snake doesn't distinguish between a 3-year-old or a 10-year-old. It bites and it doesn't really want the other person to exist. It wants the other person to perish. Now, when we are envious, we are constantly looking at what we don't have and we wanting to not only usurp the qualities of the other person, we are also wanting them to be bereft of their success. You see, it happens in spiritual society as well, very unfortunately, where if one is making advancement spiritually, then those who are not making advancement spiritually, they would start wanting to pull them down. This is enviousness. So Krishna is basically saying that follow these injunctions carefully. Don't become envious. It's practically, the idea is that don't become envious of those who apparently are more successful than you in executing their duties and the results are coming in. What is it which makes people envious? The results, isn't it? If you endeavor as a businessman, one businessman can become envious of the other businessman because the results are superior. So Krishna is basically saying, don't become envious. Follow these injunctions for the sake of purification. Do what you need to do without attachment. You may get 100,000 while someone else gets 1,000,000. You don't become envious. Do you understand? See, it is contextual. You had a question? Yeah.
Meat eating, according to Varnashrama, is it right in some ashramas eating meat?
Varnas, you mean? Not ashramas. Varnas, yeah? Well, basically, there are instances which are given where it is allowed, but it is also allowed in the Puranas. There are certain Puranas which allows this to happen for people of certain consciousness. So they have stipulations. The stipulations are you don't eat on Ashtami, you don't eat on Amavasya, you don't eat on a certain day, you eat on a certain day. A certain kind of deity who can accept meat is the only person who can be offered and they can have it. So there are huge stipulations which are again being given so that eventually they are free from the propensity to eat meat. You understand? It is not so much an encouragement to eat meat. It is because it is being recognized that these people have the propensity based on the modes of nature. So instead of repressing those propensities, you regulate them based on Vedic injunctions. give them principles on whom to offer, what to offer. And then the whole principle of offering something, even if it is meat, makes them follow a certain vidhi. You see? This is an off example, but just to give you an idea. It is not an accurate example which is connected to your question. You see? When Putana wanted to kill Krishna, she came in the form of a mother. So by becoming and taking on the form of a mother, of wanting to suckle Krishna, practically putting ourselves as a mother, Krishna gave her the position of a mother. You see? So the idea is that you're doing that's Krishna consciousness, where if you engage in Krishna, no matter what you engage in, he accepts those aspects which are there and he gives us a higher station. That's Krishna's benediction. In a similar fashion, if one is making offerings to a deity, even if it is of a lower nature in terms of meat and so on and so forth, that offering, following the Vedic injunctions and so on and so forth, will eventually purify them of the propensity to eat meat. That is the whole idea. So you have certain Puranas saying it is okay. Then there are certain days when it is not supposed to be done, so on and so forth. What is the idea of regulating so much? The idea is to cure the propensity to eat. You see? Does it make sense?
So in that case, they don't get the bad karma.
They do, but they're already there in the bad karma.
Yeah.
They're already in the mode of ignorance. They're already in the lower modes. So since they're already in the lower modes, it's a question of, how much more can you get affected? Like the butcher. What's the point in sending the fellow to hell? Because he's already in hell. Yeah? He's constantly engaging in hellish activity all the time. So,
But reactions are less, right? Because reactions are less, right? Because if the person who is Brahmin eats meat, he has no reaction.
oh yeah. See, what is reaction? Reactions and sinful reactions are all about downgrades in consciousness. Suffering increases when there's a downgrade of consciousness. There's great suffering, isn't it? So who suffers more? Does someone in the mode of goodness suffers more, or mode of passion suffers more? Exactly. Downgrade in consciousness means there's greater suffering. Someone in passion is more attached than someone in mode of goodness. Suffering is even greater. You see? It's a downgrade, real downgrade. Yes?
I think in a few verses before the last verse, Krishna says that self-realized person, he finds pleasure within himself. Because this is just third chapter. It's not like he has attained self-realization to really feel that there is some relation with Krishna. This is just third.
A self-realized person attains pleasure in the self. Fundamentally, he attains pleasure in transcendental activities of the Jaiva Dharma. He is basically saying that a person who has already attained knowledge of the relationship, don't go by the chapter. He is giving you a sample of what to expect if there is a higher level of realization. So, for example, he's also telling Arjun, work in devotion, give everything results to me. This is the highest principle. But then that's Arjun. So it's a part of the third chapter. So what is the principle that we have to gain from today's discussion? I would just like people to summarize very quickly in 5 minutes and we'll stop here. Okay. Krishna consciousness is the easiest to follow. Absolutely, there's no doubt. If you don't follow Krishna consciousness, you don't follow Varnashram.
Life of sin.
It's a great life of sin. It's neither that, neither this. Great life of sin. What else can you summarize from today's discussion?
It's very difficult to find out which Varna we belong to. If somebody wants to follow Swadharma, that's
It is. You have to understand it from the fundamental aspect that your Swadharma is for you to perform the duty based on the roles that you have been given and to accept the results without attachment. Act without attachment. That is the fundamental message. Just understand, act without attachment. Because the moment you start getting attached to the results, bondage will result. That bondage will keep a consciousness bound at the same level we are in. or even worse. Does it make sense?
But probably in practical life, how we can motivate ourselves if results are not coming while performing the surveys and many more things, our duties. How we can motivate?
The motivation has to be by the act of performing the duties themselves. See, we talk about tolerance. Tolerance is all about tolerating the circumstance and engaging in our duty without any attachment to the results. Okay? Superlative level of action, even though motivation may not be there in terms of focusing on the results, we still should be doing our very best. That is what a sincere person is. What does he say about hypocrisy? A Shudra should not be a hypocrite. A Vaishya should not be a hypocrite. We do not want to be hypocrites where we have something going on in our head and then we have action which is completely disconnected. Instead, the advice is be very sincere, endeavor, without any attachment to the results, understanding that your ultimate goal is to be free from all these unwanted desires so that you can engage in Harinam. Yeah? Because you are engaging in activity outside. The chanting of the Mahamantra can completely free one from all kinds of karmic reactions. All kinds of karmic reactions. But it is also required that we don't keep adding by unwanted arrangements in life. Do we have this understanding? That is, what is the 10th offense in chanting of the holy names? Sorry?
Maintaining attachments.
Maintaining attachment in spite of several attractions. This is a very, very, very important aspect of what we need to understand from today as well. Why does attachment come? Because we haven't understood the nature of work. We haven't understood why we are doing what we are doing. We need to understand that we need to be able to do so for the purpose of simply being able to perform our duties. What is our real function? To be Krishnadas. Jaiva Dharma is the real function. But we perform everything else without attachment to results. So this understanding has to be there, which is very important. Yes?
That is beyond duty. So we are talking just about like performing our duty without any attachment, but then we can also perform it out of love for the Lord. Love for the souls that are existing in the house. Like say for example, household, right?
Of course.
So we're just not just doing duty, we're just doing it out of love for the Lord. Love for the devotees like that.
That is a superlative principle. I'm not talking about that. I'm touching upon a very narrow definition of what is Dharma based on conditioning. How do you relieve one from conditioning? So the chanting of the holy names and association with devotees relieves one of all kinds of conditioning. Coming in touch with Krishna relieves one of all kinds of conditioning. But it is also required for us to have this understanding while we engage in work, because we are engaging in work in the outside world. We have to be careful about what this is. So this is to give an understanding of what is Swadharma. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with propensities which exist? Because those exist, they're going to push you towards acting in certain ways because the modes are operating. How do you purify yourself from the modes and be able to move forward? So with this knowledge, it's important for us to understand, then we're able to manage things. So next week, we're going to look at the other remaining aspects of what we spoke of. What did I speak? I said we spoke of Swadharma. We'll examine what is Swadharma. Then we also talked about, we talked about Vaishnav Dharma versus, we talked about Nitya Karma. We talked about Nitya Karma versus Anitya Karma. We'll talk about that. So we'll examine as activities which are so-called religious activities, but which are quite dangerous, which may not be aligned with our scriptural understanding. We'll look at Nitya Karma and Anitya Karma. We will look at Vaishnav Dharma, and we will look at the two aspects of Vaishnav Dharma, which is Shuddha and Vidya. And within Vidya, we will look at Jnana Vidya, Vaishnav Dharma. Then we will look at Karma. So we'll look at the contamination caused by objectives other than wanting to pursue Nitya Dharma. Okay, so we'll do that in the subsequent week. Okay, everybody is clear? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki.